everyone, to Marketing in the Metaverse. I'm Michael Horvitz. I head up the brand strategy team for the Tech Pod here at Magnet Media. We are joined by two amazing experts in the Metaverse and all things Web3. Our first is Sammy Tauber, the Director and Chief Metaverse Officer at Vinci. Sammy is an award-winning musician, music producer, and is Vinci, her virtual alter ego. Sammy's considered a pioneer in the field of the metaverse and Web3, and as a phygital model, Sammy performs in real life while Vinci, as her fictional, futuristic, galactic, super sentient superheroine character, performs virtually in the metaverse. Sammy, welcome. You're in far better shape and appearance than I.
Hello, I'm happy to be here. No, I was just fighting an intergalactic space battle, so yeah. It's cool to be here.
Amazing. And we are also joined by Maxim Jago, who is a best-selling author, award-winning filmmaker, and founder of the Creativity Conference and the Creative Community, and a strategic advisor for small and large-scale organizations around the world, exploring future and emerging technologies. He has directed over 30 short films, 2 feature films, and is a regular speaker at conferences around the world. Maxim offers an optimistic, realist perspective on the future. Maxim, thank you so much for joining. We're pleased to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, we've all been watching the news and seeing Web3 and the metaverse and NFTs and all of this. And 24 months ago, we probably didn't see any of this and weren't really talking about it except for a special few. You two are among them. But a lot of these conversations start out with the same question, even though it's redundant. I feel it's kind of important. How do we define the metaverse? What is this? And why are we talking about it so much more now than we did previously? And Maxim, I'll start with you.
Yeah, this has become a bit of a party game, I think, amongst future thinkers to take turns defining it. I have maybe a slightly controversial definition for the metaverse. I would argue that the metaverse is a set of universal, interoperable standards by which diverse services can share experiences, assets, avatars, and other forms of data. And if I may, I'll offer a simple example. Let's say you're playing a game, and in that game, you've got the option to design hats. You design a hat for your avatar within that game. If the game that you're playing uses these standards, you can just flit into another game and bring the hat with you. And that's only possible if the two services, the two games, the two servers, the platforms upon which those games are built are interoperable. We always record audio in stereo with channel 1 as left and channel 2 as right. And that's a universal interoperability enabling standard. We need the same principles to apply to the experiences that we're having. And I think there's a lot of merging of ideas when people talk about the metaverse. They tend to conflate the idea of the metaverse with VR, XR, MR, AR, all of these extended reality experiences. These are just mediums by which we can consume the metaverse. And some of the most interesting forms of that are really augmented reality and that overlapping of virtual assets with the RR, which is the real world.
Sammy, same point. How do you define what this is?
Maxim really covered it, but what I would like to add to that is, why is it so important now? Like, why is everyone talking about it? I agree that it's like this nebulous, overused buzz hype word, but there is an energy going around, like universally, globally, and I'd kind of liken it to a new cultural digital renaissance kind of era. I kind of like see it as like a golden age where we are rethinking value models and systems and hierarchies, and that's kind of how it interrelates with Web3. You got the blockchain, the tech stack, peer-to-peer decentralized networks. And the metaverse is obviously, it's like the next iteration of the internet, the convergence of our physical and digital lives. And then to connect it with decentralization in Web3, there's this vision, right, of this open metaverse, which is decentralized, interoperable, and it guarantees privacy by design. So obviously that's quite utopian, and I'd more liken my view to protopian. So like Maxim, I'm an optimist about the future, but I'm also a pragmatist and a realist. And so I'm really interested in exploring ways that we can achieve this open, interoperable metaverse. And to me, it kind of stems down to self-sovereign identity, sovereign wealth, and then that's like zero knowledge proofs, like the back end kind of solution. But the front end would be, you can have multiple avatar identities, you can have digital wallets, Web3 wallets, and be able to take these digital assets, these interoperable assets between different decentralized platforms, which I believe is really empowering not only for creators, but humanity at scale.
Maxim, to Sammy's point, has the technology for digital wallets, for crypto, for some of these other elements that go into the metaverse, is that at a point where it can now scale? Where are we in sort of the utility of the products that are needed, the technology, and the scale of the metaverse itself?
Oh, this is just a fantastic question. I was in a debate about this today, in fact. And the short answer is no. We're just not ready. I would liken the implementation of wallets to the implementation of QR codes. QR codes are an old idea. They've been around for ages. They're a next generation version of barcodes. They're a really good idea. But they only really began to have significant utility when iOS and Android integrated reading QR codes into the native camera apps on the phones. And suddenly there's this explosion of utility. And importantly, there's no learning curve, right? You just need somebody to show you once. And then, oh, okay, I just used the camera app and now, oh, look at that, it's opened up a thing. And then it's down to the design of the thing. Is it a button that goes woo, or does it complicate things? But I think where we're at with wallets is that the technology is pretty much there, right? We've got the security, we've got the mechanisms for transporting the intellectual property of the data and all of that. And we're doing pretty well with developing the legislation, the laws, all that kind of stuff is all pretty much in place. But we've not yet reached a point where you press a button in the default interface of your device and it just works. We need to implement that, because at the moment, users are having to contort themselves to this inelegant software and hardware design. And the design will catch up very soon. In fact, I saw a demonstration today of a one-tap system. Fantastic. And when it does, I think we'll begin to see an explosion in, sovereign identity projects that Vinci mentioned, Sammy mentioned, and, this explosion of meaningful ownership of digital assets that we're all waiting for.
I'm curious, since so many of the people listening in now come from the marketing, the media, the platform, and sort of the brand world, what are the challenges for brands to really go from 0 to 1? For those that are sort of trying to understand what this is, how they communicate with their customers and fans, what's the first step?
Well, I feel like it's always been the same in terms of successful brands throughout history. It really comes down to your core vision and mission. What is the soul of your brand? I really believe like Steve Jobs was like the soul of Apple, and the whole think differently really resonated with the zeitgeist, and I think it still resonates today. They're not selling products, they're selling emotions, but I feel like authenticity is really going to win in the metaverse and Web3. And if you're trying to go from zero to hero, starting with your why and your purpose behind the products, and who are your target audience and demographics, who's your community, and what positive network effect do you want to achieve, that will essentially drive your vision, which will lead to your mission. From there, you can then think about different strategies for how to activate in the metaverse, or maybe it's a brand extension into the metaverse. So I'd like to talk about like this on-chain formula, which I was thinking about, which is experiential, gamified, ownership, and scarcity, because you're considering all the different immersive technologies, as well as the Web3 tech stack, as well as the key thing being the emotions and the audience. Experiential is obviously taking into context the geolocation as well as immersion. Then you've got gamified, because if you notice the nature of Gen Z, millennials, and the way it's heading is I believe the open metaverse is really being built by game developers. Like the web was built by web developers, but this open metaverse is built by game developers. And then you've also got ownership, which is about the ability to own your own identity and your assets. And that is very important to the Web3 ethos and mindset. In Web 2, we don't own our own data, right? It's controlled by these centralized, siloed platforms that, you know, you're suspect to algorithmic filtration bubble echo chambers and manipulative advertising and the harvesting of your data. So I feel like we are very cognizant of that now. And it's also perception. Like, you're not, you know, a customer or a user. You know, like social media was designed like gambling, like for addiction with the news feed. You know, what positive user design interface experiences are you going to create that create positive, not only neurological effects for yourself, but a wider network of humanity? And then, yes, scarcity as well, because people value scarcity. It's having a sense of positive futurism, because if you look at the macro context of the world right now, people need to believe in something and believe that they have impact. So if I was a brand starting out, those are the things I would consider.
Maxim, I feel like this is a daily issue for you and your team with your partners. What is the, you know, what's day one that you're telling folks to do?
My goodness, you know, yeah, it's about once an hour we get into this. I just want to say everything that Sammy said, but with my voice. I know they say imitation is the highest form of flattery, but again, I think Sammy really nailed it. And there's a couple of things that she shared there that I think are really particularly critical. It's funny, for years I would introduce myself as a futurist, and it's gotten corny now. I need a new name. I might just make up a word.
You can have multiple.
Yeah, different hats as well. You know, for years I've been saying that for you to forecast the future, what you're really doing is you're kind of looking at the past in a mirror, right? You're looking ahead, but there's a mirror in front of you, and you're looking at human nature. You're looking at historical precedent, and you're forecasting, you know, these little threads that weave themselves through time. There's like a tapestry of different threads in our culture, in our needs, in our fundamental processes that make us human. And I think that it's important to keep in mind that we haven't changed that much as a species. Let's remember that the human beings are at the center of this thing that we're discussing, right? The consumers, the creators, the developers, the experiencers are all human beings. We haven't changed very much in about 200,000 years. Our epigenetic and genetic memory, our predispositions are almost completely universal. There are very minor variations that are not culture. Culture varies a lot, but the variations that are in our ethnicity are almost non-existent. There's very little. It's mostly epigenetic memory, which is recent generations. It's not really your genotype. But broadly speaking, we haven't changed much in a couple of 100,000 years. And so I think it's important to keep in mind what our fundamental needs are as beings. We've all heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We need air, water, shelter, food. What are our most fundamental needs as beings, and how are those needs met by this product or service, this experience? How are those needs met in better ways than we've got already? And one of the things that before the lockdowns and the pandemic, a lot of people were saying, oh, you know, the post-pandemic world is going to be unrecognizable. We've got to prepare for it. And I was saying, nonsense. The world will be about 92% identical to the way it was before the lockdown, because our need for human contact, our need for human connection cannot be completely fulfilled with pixels and, you know, video calling. We have to. It's not that we just want to. We must have face-to-face communication with people in a shared environment. Now, virtual reality experiences help us to a degree because you are sharing an experience, right? And now we're developing technologies where you can pick up facial expressions and body language. And we're starting to see, pupil detection so that you can see the directions people look, which, by the way, is crucial to us as a species and is the reason probably that we have whites in our eyes, unlike animal species, because the subtle movements of your pupils when you're speaking to somebody are non-verbally, precognitively communicating how you feel and what you're really thinking. So for me, to Sammy's point, the really crucial stuff is How are you serving people's fundamental needs? And crucially, Sammy mentioned authenticity. I don't know I feel like I should write this word authenticity in letters of fire on the horizon. You cannot do it and you will fail if you're not authentic and honest and true and you don't really mean it. And if you think that you can fake it, start again. You've got to mean it. And so if you look at the social media accounts that are super successful, they're all accounts where people just they share their authentic feelings. And crucially, the second point that Sammy mentioned, I want to highlight and agree with emphatically, is this idea that you've got to have a goal. We get really fixated on our solutions and the next step in the decision-making process. We've got to focus on what is the change that you want to see in the world, and probably you're going to try to achieve that by changing people who experience your product or service. How do you want them to feel differently? How do you want them to think differently? And let's hope that your goal is that you leave the world better rather than worse, that you're not just using people, but you want them to be greater than they were before they started.
If I'm hearing it, it's, brands should approach this as being a catalyst to enhance and not necessarily about self-serving or selling more product, but really creating an environment that is beneficial and supports their customers in a way that they otherwise wouldn't necessarily be able to do.
Could I just add just while because you mentioned something really important there. I've been a keynote speaker for 25 years maybe. The crucial thing when you're giving a talk to an audience is that nobody cares how impressive you are. A lot of brands forget this when they're developing services and products. Nobody's interested. Nobody cares. What people want is, and they don't care how amazing your project is either. What they want is that if they listen to you speak, and this is the same, I think, for any metaverse experience that people develop, at the end of the experience, they want to feel greater than they were before they sat down. They want to feel something more. They want to be energized, informed, educated, entertained, like the BBC Charter. They want to feel that they, in some way, have become more than they were before they engaged with you. And I think if people can seek to create experiences, metaverse technologies, that empower, that lift up, that enlighten, that somehow help their audience to transcend their situation, those are the experiences that are going to go wild and be successful.
Can I add something to that?
Please, Sammy, go ahead.
I really agree with Maxim. I was just thinking about Plato's allegory of the cave, and I saw this article and they were likening it to the trajectory of where it could go with the metaverse. It's quite famous, obviously they would prefer in the cave to look at the shadows rather than see the light and the natural world. And I don't approach the future from a fear-based mentality. In fact, I approach it from a love-based mentality, the classic shaman, which wolf do you feed? But it's important to be aware of different timelines of where it could go, because we've seen Web 2 and the impact it's had on people, positive and negative. And so if we liken this to the metaverse, right, where we've got hyper-realism, everything's immersive, haptic feedback, biometrics, tracking and tracing of data, I'm very optimistic and hopeful that we don't forget our humanity, but not just our humanity, but our connection with nature. Because that is a large driver. What I believe will be the successful companies as well, and brands are the ones that don't negate that, which is why some people misconstrue the metaverse as just virtual reality, but it really is not. It's how do you positively impact the real world and nature, and that's the positive network effect.
To that point, I'd love to hear a little bit about your take on the social responsibility that we all have with the metaverse. Obviously, everything that's good and bad on the internet is going to be good and bad in there. Where do you see the responsibility of not just the developers, but the brands that are participating in sort of the genesis of what this is, to create an environment that, to your old point, is about enhancement and not a place that's unhealthy and destructive?
So experiences that are beneficial, right? I mean, I think that Sammy touched on something really, really crucial there. We are animals. We're pattern-finding primates. And one of the dangers, I think, is that the way engineers think is really helpful if your goal is engineering. Uh, if I can say it that way, it's like the puddle thing, like the puddle thinks, isn't it lucky this hole just fits me? But a lot of our technologies are designed by people whose focus is on the technology itself and not on the experience. And I think, again, Sammy's point is really important. We are animals who find peace in natural environments and in a sympathetic relationship with the real world around us. And I think it's important that the experiences people create enable us to be more alive and not to disconnect from one another. Now, we are moving in a direction where you will be able to read people and to stay connected. And I think, services like Facebook, they get a really rough ride in the media because of some missteps that they've definitely had. But I think it's important to recognize what they've actually achieved for us as a species, the ways in which they've enabled us to bridge relationships through extraordinary amounts of time. One of the things I've been talking about a great deal lately is natural language interaction with computing, and the way in which this not only enables us to have a more intuitive relationship with technology, but also it enables technologies, plural, to interact. Natural language interaction becomes a lingua franca for all compatible AIs, so that they can then train one another and become wide area software and hand our experiences off between them. It's really a powerful idea. But as we move towards virtual humans, AIs that have procedurally generated behaviors and characters and personas, and if we can reach a point where those personas, those beings, it's probably too strong a word, those characters have access to our biofeedback devices. They can read your heart rate, your surface electrical tension on your skin, basic cardiogram, and so on and so on. These characters are going to be able to help you therapeutically. They're going to understand you. They're going to know what you've eaten today. They're going to know about your medical conditions. They're going to know how much sleep you've had. And if you're, as I've said many times, if you're freaking out about an argument with your boss, your AI assistant, your PPA, your private personal assistant, may well say, hey, before you send that email, Michael, why don't you give those neurotransmitters about another 23 minutes to travel through your mammalian brain so that you can breathe and write a more kind message. I think that the opportunity we have for a utopia, which is an extreme in its own form and with its own problems, but the opportunity we have for a bright future in terms of these experiences is wrapped up in kindness, compassion, connection. And I actually think if you look at the community, the people that are developing these technologies, everyone hugs hello. I know it sounds stupid, but it's really important. Everyone's a hugger. Everyone is genuinely just trying to make things better.
Something we did not get to do for about 2 years.
Can I add something?
Please.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what Maxim was saying with artificial intelligence. So this whole Vinci project started from seeing a meme on the internet, actually, of the Vitruvian Man, but it was half cyborg, half man. And that gave me the inspiration for my artist name Vinci, which I reinterpreted with the lettering. And then I read a book, The Singularity is Near, by Ray Kurzweil. And I was thinking about the technological singularity in the future. They have different dates, like 2045 and all of that. But I was thinking about the convergence, not only from a storytelling perspective, because that's my main area, combining multimedia storytelling, but humanity at scale, and how humans will feel when we are encountering this rapid acceleration of technology and artificial intelligence. And it's really interesting because this is a very strong part of the metaverse, because the metaverse won't be fully built by humans, but it will be built by AI as well. It will be moderated by AI. We'll have AI NPCs, digital twins. And so, to Maxim's point, having a positive effect with artificial intelligence working in partnership and in symbiosis with humanity actually was a core mission for me and driver behind the creation of this fictional super sentient. I got the word super sentient from Nick Bostrom's thesis on superintelligence, superheroine. Even though I am a human, full disclosure, driving right now the motion capture of this avatar, I've always entertained the idea of what it would be like having various AI iterations of Vinci in the open interoperable metaverse, and how that would work if it connected maybe to an SSI. This is pure speculation, but I'd like to see it have a positive effect. And I also want to say to the point with humans in general, like, it's not our role to be NPCs. We are meant to live and experience life. We are not non-player characters like in the Matrix. So I still believe there's, an element of humanity to AI because we are inputting that data, but it will come with its own inherent biases. And this is just my belief, but AI will be a reflection of the micro and the macro of humanity. And so it comes back down to our own ethics as humans, and that will inevitably affect the outcome and result of AI in the metaverse and beyond.
I want to get back a little bit to the kind of the logistics of this. McKinsey is saying that in 7 years this will be a $5 trillion industry. There's other financial institutions that have put it at 13 trillion. A couple weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal put out an article that Meta's Metaverse is somewhere around 300,000 people. Right? It's the size of a little bit bigger than Newark, New Jersey. Why are we not adapting this as quickly as those are sort of speculating that we will? What are the hurdles that are preventing this from scaling? Maxim, I'll turn to you.
Well, imagine if I said you can have this anti-gravity belt. It's going to be amazing. Fly anywhere you like. It's going to be spectacular. But you can only use it if you speak Portuguese fluently, which is a beautiful language and it's worth learning. But how many people are going to go to the trouble? I think the challenge that we have, as I touched on earlier, is that while it's true, I mean, look at us now. We're doing this interview and presentation, and literally, Sammy's in Australia on the other side of the world. I'm in Lisbon. Michael, I don't know where you are, and it doesn't matter for the purposes of this interview, right? How phenomenal is that we've pretty much nailed? You could just click a thing and you're in a call, and here we are chatting, right? But when it comes to the types of experiences that we're discussing, there are still some hoops for people to jump through. Like, they're still learning a second or a third language. And I think that most people will not feel that it's important enough to go to the trouble. Most of the experiences that are being developed, you're not going to feed your families with them. For sure, of course, it's a bell curve, right? There's extremes, and there are people who are earning livings. There are people that are working as architects, developing interior spaces. I mean, all of that's happening for sure. But the vast majority of people that are going to consume these experiences have these experiences, and they are experiences. You don't just observe it, right? You're having an experience. It's not worth it for them. It's bad enough for most of them, the idea of wearing a virtual reality headset, let alone, even though it's intuitive and it's three-dimensional and it follows the way our thinking works, they don't want to learn about the interface and the menus and so on. I think that the reason that the take-up isn't that big is because people are nervous of the technology. They're nervous about learning the language of the technology. The technology needs to catch up with human nature and work in a way that's pure and intuitive for us. And also, though, I want to comment on the numbers you quoted there, these trillions of dollars. I think that's true of Web3. My working definition of the metaverse is rather broad. But if we're going to speak about virtual experiences and virtual environments, I think we're a ways off. I think that really begins to have value for people in about 3 to 5 years, where we start to get away from, let's say, for example, if I can take Vinci as an example, we need this level of fidelity for the visuals. Vinci just looks beautiful and textured and detailed, and you can see the light falling on the surfaces there. And we're not getting that in most of our XR experiences. We're getting this kind of flattened, cartoonish aesthetic. And that's fun, but it's not as amazing as looking at an actual sunset or an actual sunrise or even your friend's actual face. And so I think as the technology becomes closer to photorealism and as the experiences expand and headsets get cheaper and lighter and more comfortable, then we'll begin to see a bigger take up.
Sammy, where do you see the hurdle being from where we are now to where some of these projections are taking us?
I think it comes down to self-belief. I think a lot of people in this world don't believe they have agency. I think, we do need democratization and accessibility of technology. I wouldn't be a music producer if it wasn't for the internet and access to resources and, even Unreal Game Engine's very accessible. It's free. You can learn it. And that's a starting point in terms of content creation. But if we scale out and if we're just looking at the future of the internet, the future of humanity, people need to believe and know intrinsically that they can shape the future. I think the thing is we look at all these companies and go, they're going to create the experience and the network effect. But what I've noticed and what I really like about this renaissance or this movement that I feel like I'm part of, like I go to all these conferences around the world and people want to help each other. Like that I believe is the spirit of Web3, right? If you don't know something, they have these network events and you meet up and you learn and you share from each other. I think people are ready to create new systems that will rising tide lifts all boats sort of analogy. It's a major mental and paradigm shift from where we've been before. Web 2 and just humanity, it's very competitive, but realistically, the model would be now more like a co-opetition, the way I see it. So it'd be more healthy collaboration with a healthy competition where everyone wins. So it really comes down to mindset. And there's a great book. I think it's Abundance, Peter Diamandis, but I like that theory of moving towards super abundance. Obviously, times are turbulent now, but if everyone intrinsically believes that they can shape the future and lead to that future of superabundance, I believe we will get there. And I'll speak personally for what I'm doing. My way of contributing to society is using imagination. Imagination can defy physics. But beyond that, I hope it emotionally resonates with people to encourage them to think about what impact they can have on the world. And so I've just finished writing a novel with a diverse cast of characters besides Vinci. It's futuristic and it's science fiction, but my hope is that it will translate to real world good deeds because of the moral coda from the novel. And what is interesting is like we've had like franchises like Marvel and superheroes throughout time in comics, and it's always like them saving people. I just want to say like this character Vinci, she's not necessarily here to save others. I mean, she can, but she has to save herself, and the message is that everyone is their own hero of their own journey. It's like the word monomyth, the hero's journey. So, everyone has agency and everyone has the ability to explore who they are as an avatar, like physically. Like the word avatar comes from the ancient Sanskrit word avatara, which means like descent or something. So it's our consciousness, in our human bodies. So if you think about that impact in the metaverse and who you want to be, it's almost like you're the best version or like where you would like to be or a higher dimensional. So Vinci, she's a warrior spirit, a super sentient super heroine. So I believe we all are, warriors in some sense, because if you have positive intentions, that will lead to superabundance. And I think the economic models, this is a bit utopian, but the economic models that would reward positive intentions or positive network effects is where we're going to see real change.
We opened with defining what this is and what the metaverse is. I'd love to end by hearing from each of you. What is this going to look like a year from now, 5 years from now? Maxim, what's your prediction?
My prediction is that, and I share with Sammy this belief in the importance of kindness and setting out to be a good person to do good. And I think it's very difficult to know if what you're doing is good, but it's crucial that you believe your intentions are good. If I can make that subtle distinction. And I think that we're going to begin to see in the next 5 years more and more of people's intentions, good intentions, being manifest with these fast-changing technologies. It's quick gratification, right? We're going to see these things manifest. We're going to see people engaging with them. I think that we, as a species, are migrating away from a societal model that is single unified sources of power. We're moving towards a distributed network intelligence model, which is incredibly wonderful in all the ways that Sammy just mentioned. I think we're going to move towards photorealism. I think we'll begin to see some pretty reasonable natural language interaction. We'll begin to see procedurally generated behaviors in virtual characters. And I think we might begin to see the reintroduction of an old word, scenarist. A scenarist is somebody who creates scenarios, and we will see scenarists creating scenarios where outcomes are unknown until somebody experiences them. We'll have experiences. And I think we'll begin finally to see the proper integration of these disparate technologies so that we're no longer talking about, Nike's metaverse or JLo's metaverse or some museum's metaverse. It will just be the metaverse based on interoperable standards that allow them to connect together and allow people to migrate between them. So I think we'll begin to see the actual metaverse in 5 years.
Sammy, where are we going to be?
I think we will be where we choose to be collectively. So it's not my place to say where we will be. It will be collectively where we all choose to go. But I believe we'll be changing like hedonics, set points. We'll be redefining hierarchies, models, institutions. There will always be that sense of profit, of course, but people will be much more cognizant and aware and awake to those with good intentions and what true impact there will be on the world. And I think humanity will also think about that they have agency with their own predictive programming in whatever form that is, in whatever vertical or industry. So how do you want to see the future? You can do your own predictive programming on an individual scale, and then collectively, if we all do that and we're all aligned, then that's where we can get to that place of super abundance.
Amazing. Well, this has been an incredible chat. You definitely brought me back to my intro to philosophy course in college, where we were talking about metaphysics and Plato's The Cave and existentialism. So it's as we were looking forward, we're always looking backward. Sammy, Maxim, thank you so much for joining us here today, and we'll see you again with both of us in the metaverse, and all be in a way different skin.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Of course.
Thanks for having me.